Machiavelli reveals how the most foolish people gain power. There's a question we've all pondered at some point. How does someone with little wisdom, no real vision, and seemingly no depth end up in power? How do the people who lack insight, empathy, or even basic competence manage to command nations, corporations, and massive audiences? It feels like a glitch in the system, like reality is broken. But what if it's not a glitch at all? What if this is exactly how the system is designed to function? And what if, as Machiavelli suggested, the very traits that make someone foolish, by philosophical or moral standards, are the same traits that make them rise like smoke in a society built on perception over substance? Machiavelli, the most misunderstood political philosopher in history, didn't glorify deception, he revealed it. He didn't worship power, he dissected it. And what he discovered centuries ago still holds terrifying relevance today. His book, The Prince, is not a manual for villains, it's a mirror for the world. It shows us that power doesn't always go to the wise, or the just, or the honorable. Often, it goes to those who are cunning enough to appear powerful, even when they're hollow on the inside. To those who know how to manipulate appearances, emotions, and momentum. And that's the key in a world ruled by perception. Substance is a liability. Depth slows you down. Nuance is inconvenient. Emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and ethical restraint, these are not always assets in the race for power. They are weight.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Now let's zoom out. In every generation we see the same pattern. The loudest rise faster than the wisest. The bold overtake the thoughtful. The foolish but confident gain attention, and attention becomes currency. And once you control attention, you control narratives. You control reality. Why? Because most people don't seek truth. They seek certainty. They seek charisma. They seek validation. And foolishness, when dressed up in confidence, delivers all three. It tells people what they want to hear, not what they need to know. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that a ruler must appear virtuous, not necessarily be virtuous. Why? Because the masses judge by what they see, not by what is. They are moved by spectacle, not by substance. And this isn't a condemnation of people, it's a revelation of human nature. We are wired to trust what's visible, repeatable, confident. And this is how the foolish gain power, not through intelligence, but through social intuition, through the ability to mirror the public's desires, to exploit their fears, and to offer simple answers to complex problems. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How often do you choose leaders, mentors, or influencers based on how they make you feel rather than the depth of their thinking? How often does confidence convince you more than clarity? How often does charisma seduce you into mistaking it for competence? This is the Machiavellian paradox. Truth is slow, but power is fast. And in a culture obsessed with speed, the fast win. The ones who hesitate to think deeply, who act without reflection, who charge forward without asking if the path is just or wise, they create momentum. And momentum, Machiavelli knew, is everything. Once the crowd starts moving, it justifies itself. But here's the deeper layer. The foolish often don't know they are foolish. They are not reflective enough to see the limits of their thinking. They are driven by ego, not introspection. And ego has one massive advantage: it doesn't pause. It doesn't question itself. That's why foolishness can be so efficient. It doesn't get bogged down in complexity. It doesn't second guess. It doesn't wait. It acts, and in a world addicted to action, that's all it takes to get ahead. So what does this mean for us? Are we doomed to live in a world where the shallow rise and the deep drown? Not necessarily, but we need to understand the terrain we're walking on. We need to see how the game is played if we ever want to change the rules. Because the truth is, the world doesn't reward wisdom unless it's paired with strategy. It doesn't reward insight unless it's also compelling. It doesn't reward truth unless it's told in a way people can feel. And this is where we, as individuals, have to make a choice. Do we withdraw in disgust, or do we engage with intention? Do we let the foolish run the show, or do we learn how to navigate the very system that elevates them without becoming them? That's the real challenge: to be wise and effective, deep and visible, ethical and strategic. Because here's the final twist: Machiavelli didn't believe that only fools could win. He believed the wise could win too, but only if they understood that power is a game of perception. And that to play it without selling your soul, you must master the art of being both real and readable, truthful and tactical, invisible in your depth, but undeniable in your impact. The confidence illusion: why certainty beats intelligence in the game of power. If there's one thing that power consistently rewards, it's not intelligence. It's certainty. And that's the most dangerous illusion of all: the idea that confidence equals competence. Because once you understand how easily people are swayed by the appearance of certainty, you begin to see just how many of the world's most powerful figures are not wise or insightful, but simply bold, loud, unwavering. And that unwavering posture, even when built on ignorance, is often mistaken for leadership. We're not trained to discern depth, we're trained to follow strength, or at least the illusion of it. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago and documented it with chilling clarity. He observed that people would rather follow a decisive fool than a hesitant genius. Why? Because most of us are uncomfortable with ambiguity. We crave clarity, even if it's false. We want someone to say, "This is the way," even if they've never walked that path. And the person who delivers that certainty with confidence, without flinching, without apology, becomes magnetic. They become a reference point in a world of confusion. Now pause and think. How many people have you followed, admired, or voted for not because they were the most intelligent, but because they seemed the most sure? How many times have you doubted yourself in the presence of someone who was simply louder, quicker, or more forceful in their opinions? This is not your fault. It's a fundamental part of human psychology. We look to others for cues, and when someone projects certainty, we assume they must know what we don't. This is what I call the confidence illusion. And in the modern world, it's been weaponized. Politicians, influencers, CEOs, and thought leaders have learned that you don't need to have the best ideas, you just need to sell them with the most conviction. The media amplifies those who speak in absolutes. Ambiguity doesn't go viral. Nuance doesn't trend. But bold claims, sound bites, and emotional certainty, that spreads like wildfire. Machiavelli anticipated this. He wrote that a prince must seem resolute, even when he is unsure. Because the appearance of stability is more valuable than the reality of it. People trust what they can see. They don't want to hear about the complexities of a situation. They want a leader who acts. And here lies the trap. The truly intelligent often hesitate. They think. They consider alternatives. They ask questions. And each moment of reflection makes them appear unsure, even though they are simply being rigorous. Meanwhile, the fool, unburdened by complexity, charges forward. And in a society that equates speed with strength, the fool often wins. But confidence without wisdom is a form of tyranny. It leads to decisions made without understanding, policies made without foresight, and followers led off cliffs. And yet, time and again we reward it. Because we don't take the time to separate the appearance of power from the essence of it. We don't ask, is this person right? We ask, do they seem right? That subtle shift is how mediocrity rises. Because seeming right is easier than being right. So what's the antidote? How do we avoid being seduced by the illusion of confidence? The first step is to become radically aware, to question not just what people say, but how they say it, to pause and ask, am I believing this because it makes sense, or because it feels good to believe it? To train ourselves to value clarity over charisma and truth over tone. We also have to look inward, because many of us silence ourselves not because we lack intelligence, but because we lack certainty. We wait until we're 100% sure before speaking up. Meanwhile, the less thoughtful rush in with 60% certainty and dominate the room. If we want to balance the scales, we must learn to match our intelligence with courage, to speak even when we're still forming our thoughts, to act even while refining our understanding. But that doesn't mean faking confidence. It means owning our process and refusing to let the loudest voices define the narrative. Machiavelli wasn't endorsing dishonesty, he was exposing how the world reacts to it. He wanted us to see the game clearly so we could play it wisely. So the next time you feel overshadowed by someone who seems so sure, remember, confidence is not truth. And truth, when paired with quiet conviction, is far more powerful than we've been led to believe. The herd reflex, why societies reward followers pretending to lead. There's a strange paradox at the heart of power. Most of the people who rise to the top are not true leaders, they're followers in disguise. They don't create new paths. They mirror the crowd's desires. But they don't challenge the prevailing winds. They sail with them. And yet, these people are often the ones we crown as leaders. Why? Because society has a deep, unconscious reflex. It rewards those who reflect its values, not those who question them. This is the herd reflex. And once you understand it, you begin to see why those who appear to lead are often just the most skilled at following collective sentiment. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, and he didn't mince words. He warned that a successful ruler must know how to manipulate the moods of the masses, how to appear virtuous without being constrained by virtue. But what he was really pointing to is this: people are uncomfortable with real leadership. But we say we want visionaries, but what we usually reward is validation. We want someone who tells us we're already right, someone who echoes our fears and flatters our beliefs. True leaders, those who challenge us, force us to grow, confront our blind spots, are often ignored, marginalized, or attacked. Why? Because they make us uncomfortable. And comfort, not truth, is the currency of the herd. This explains why so many people in power seem to have no original ideas. They scan the cultural landscape, identify what's trending, and then position themselves as champions of that trend. They don't lead, they ride waves. And because they do it with confidence, with strategic language and emotional appeal, they're mistaken for visionaries. But they're not creating the tide, they're just surfing it. So why does the crowd fall for it? Because the crowd seeks affirmation. Most people don't want to break away from the herd, they want the herd to feel safe, strong, and justified. And whoever helps them feel that way becomes their leader, even if that person is simply mirroring them. It's not about wisdom, it's about resonance. But the most rewarded figures in society are not those who think differently, but those who sound familiar while appearing new. And here's the deeper tragedy. Many of these so-called leaders start believing their own performance. They begin to think they truly are original, insightful, and powerful. But the moment the crowd shifts, so do they. Because their strength isn't rooted in truth, it's rooted in alignment with consensus. And consensus is a moving target. This is why so many powerful people seem lost when the cultural winds change. They were never anchored. They were never leading. They were simply reflecting the dominant mood. Now ask yourself, how often do you hold back your real voice because it doesn't match the collective tone? How often do you watch people rise not because they're wise, but because they're willing to say what's already being said, just louder or more strategically? And how often do we, as a society, mistake repetition for originality? This is the herd reflex in action. It's the engine behind the rise of the foolish, the confident, the derivative. And it will continue to run until we, as individuals, begin to break it. That starts with rewarding authenticity over performance, depth over popularity, and vision over validation. It starts when we stop following followers. The final power shift: how to rise without becoming what you despise. So now we arrive at the final question, the one that matters most. If the game of power rewards confidence over intelligence, obedience over originality, and illusion over truth, then how do you rise without losing yourself? How do you enter the arena without becoming a performer? How do you gain influence without imitating the very forces you seek to disrupt? This is where philosophy meets personal revolution. Because the solution isn't to abandon power, it's to redefine it. Power doesn't have to mean domination. It doesn't have to mean manipulation. True power, the kind that lasts, comes from alignment. When your actions match your values, when your words reflect your thoughts, when your presence is grounded not in performance but in presence itself, that is power. Not the kind that flashes and fades, but the kind that transforms. Machiavelli, for all the cynicism attributed to him, never said you must become corrupt to succeed. He simply warned that the world rewards those who understand how to appear. But what if we could play the game without being consumed by it? What if we could master perception without betraying truth? That's the final power shift. It's when you become fluent in the language of influence, but choose to speak with integrity. It's when you understand how the crowd moves, but you don't let it steer your soul. To do this, you need to cultivate two rare qualities: discernment and courage. But discernment allows you to see through the noise, to recognize when someone is leading versus performing. And courage gives you the strength to speak when your voice trembles, to act when the crowd hesitates, to plant your flag in the ground and say, "This is who I am," even if no one claps. But here's the truth most people won't tell you. You will lose things along the way. You will lose approval. You will lose followers. You will lose people who only loved the version of you that fit their expectations. But what you gain is worth more. You gain yourself. And once you have that, you are no longer just in the world. You are shaping it, not through noise, not through manipulation, but through presence, alignment, and truth. So ask yourself, what do I want more, influence or integrity? Popularity or purpose? Applause or authenticity? Because you will be tested. The world will offer you shortcuts. It will tempt you with easy power. But the final power shift is not about domination. It's about transformation. It's about becoming the kind of person whose influence is not just felt but remembered. You don't need to become what you despise to rise. You need to rise despite it, with clarity, with strategy, and above all, with the quiet, unshakable strength of someone who has chosen the long road over the easy win. That is how you win without losing your soul. And that, Machiavelli would say, is the rarest power of all.